Good afternoon. We are getting there. Last panel. I hope you had a good afternoon. My name is Laurent Pacheco. I am the chairman of the London VC Network, so even more pleased to have welcomed you today. I also run the International Family Office Alliance for Health, and I'm a VC investor with an American VC called Solas Bioventures. We have 3 investors today, a VC investor and 2 family office investors. The title we have is quite broad, right? So the role, it's not written here, but we wanted to discuss the role of family office and VCs, but we actually, of course, will dive a bit deeper, understand the difference, put ourselves in their shoes, ask them if they were in the founder's shoes as well, and discuss some industry dynamics. So we'll start with introduction. Vanela.
Hi, everyone. I'm Vanela. I'm co-founder at H3 Capital. We are a London-based early-stage VC fund with a specific investment thesis in and around the intersection of computation, data, and life sciences. I've spent the last 18 years working across life sciences and healthcare, both as an investor and operator, so I've got a mix of operating and investment skill set. Very pleased to be here, and I look forward to the discussion.
Hi everyone, my name's Cam. I'm here with Rockspring. We're a family office that invests in early stage deep tech companies. We look for maniacally ambitious founders solving large problems, as disruptive as possible. The more disruptive, the better.
Oh, echo the last one. So my name is Jogchum Brinksma. I run a family office. We invest in university spin-outs. Typically, we seek innovative technologies which really have a breakthrough. But first and foremost of all, we invest in teams. Right chemistry, between the team, perseverance, tenacity, to fight on, not to give up, and good listeners. So that's what we look for.
Very good, welcome. So we'll start with a helicopter view, and I want to ask you, what do you find exciting these days in terms of investment opportunities? What are you excited about? And do you see trends in exits or M&A? What's happening out there?
Shall I go first? So, as I mentioned earlier, our investment thesis is in and around the intersection of tech, data, and life sciences. And we've been talking for quite some time now around precision medicine and about precision medicine and how that's going to transform therapeutic delivery, how it's going to transform healthcare, and so on. But we are now at a point where we're actually seeing that materializing because we've seen an explosion of data. We've seen advancements around computation that have made some of the use cases that we were aspiring to maybe 5 years ago possible today. And obviously what's happening on the bio side, the innovation happening there is also very interesting. And so that combination of the two has been very, very interesting from an investment perspective. So the whole precision medicine space we find very compelling. We have, through past exposure, and I can see Robert at the back, invested in multi-omic health, which is a good example of that combination of data, computation, and innovation in and around biology. So multi-omic health, for example, have gone after a multi-omics-based approach, which, as the name implies, being able to interrogate different layers of biology as it relates to the metabolic syndrome space, which until very recently wasn't possible because we didn't have the computational engine and ability to be able to interrogate different layers of biology, and now that's being made possible. So that's another example, and I think if you were here for the previous panel, Innoviv Health is another company we invested in, where they're using very high-resolution mass spec-based biomarker panels to actually really narrow down the patient populations that should be addressed in the context of a clinical trial. And as a result, they've forged many successful collaborations with biopharma companies. Their panels are being used in the context of de-risking phase 2 clinical trials in a very successful way. So I think the whole precision medicine space is an area that's just beginning to show the full potential that this area has to offer.
we have the privilege of having quite a broad scope when it comes to deep tech. So we've backed, from things such as DeepMind to kind of baby incubators. So we've got quite a broad remit. As I echo your views, we kind of back the founder more than anything else. But the things that excite me more on the health side of things, that's the topic of today, is we've found quite a nice niche in UK hardware medtech, stuff that's solving a real problem that tugs on the heartstrings of individuals and builds real community. Being in the deep tech space, I think we found that there's lots of deep tech VCs, but in the health space and the pharma space, I suppose there are large pools of capital, but they're very specific. Whereas if you're solving a problem in menstrual science or home diagnostics, you can build a very big community. And that's what we're getting excited about now, solving healthcare problems that have a broader remit.
Yeah, what excites me? Is basically platform-led partnerships, partnerships with multiple therapeutic assets, where basically we can help them advance into clinical trials. So multiple assets, multiple partners, so basically thereby de-risking the investment. And I think that is an ability to thereby scale. And really see that we have early funding as well to pre-royalty payments for those companies. So you have a very early break-even point realized. We just had one of our investments had an exit up and coming, and that model I think we should try to replicate as well here in Cambridge with another company, which we just made similar investments in.
Very good, thank you very much. So we are interested in discussing how you assess opportunities, like the business perspective. Of course, we can't go into every detail, so let's pick two dimensions, I guess. What's your take on assessing risk, and then how do you balance that with the need for capital?
Okay, I'll go first again. So we look at risk across three very simplistic dimensions, right? So it's team risk, market risk, and product risk. Firstly, on the team, everyone talks about product market fit. We also look at market team fit, which is very, very important, particularly in the context of, for example, delivering services or solutions to biopharma companies. There is an expectation from those clients that the level of understanding of the industry maturity should match the kind of the existing makeup of the leadership in those companies, right? And the expectation there is very different to that of say, a tech founder that is going after a consumer business. So we are quite mindful of those expectations and differences, and also what's required from a skill set perspective to successfully commercialize and take a product to market. Sometimes the understanding of the industry, and sometimes it's probably an underestimate, because very often the understanding of the industry and understanding where the pain point lie is super important in being able to take those therapeutics or novel products to market in a successful way. And then on the market front, with the VC lens, you always look for large markets. Typically, the way we assess investments, we want at least a 10x return on an individual investment. And so if the investment case doesn't warrant that, and if the market is not sufficiently big, then it's not something for us. There are other investors out there that would probably go after a different risk-return profile, but that's what we typically look for. And then on the product itself, it depends a little bit, because we are quite open to investing across the value chain, from early stage drug discovery all the way through to commercial. And so the type of risk that we take across that value chain tends to be very different. At the earliest stages, we're primarily looking to take on bio and IP risk, so there's a lot of science risk. Therefore, we want to make sure that from a moat perspective, defensibility perspective, we are looking into companies that are investing into companies that have a very clear moat and defensible position from an IP standpoint, novel tech, novel biology, and so on. And then as you move up the value chain in and around, for example, clinical trials, the commercial space, in those areas we tend to take a different type of risk, so it tends to be more a mix of go-to-market and tech risk. And therefore, there we'll look for areas that give us sufficient comfort that this investment will scale up successfully. And typically what we look for is early traction with customers, Going back to that point in and around product market fit and seeing early indicators or sign that this is something that will ramp up successfully in the longer term.
Quite nicely structured. Yeah. Cam.
Well, we invest at pre-seed, so risk is something we've got to get very comfortable with very quickly. If you think of that sales cycle of a deep tech company, the environment around them may change 3 or 4 times before they actually get to a point at which they're, an exit is looking likely. So I think the risk we look at more often than not is regulation risk. We'd rather not take an investment that requires some sort of regulation to change or for regulation to stay the same. The biggest risk we take is on the founder, right? So the founder is everything. The tech may be brilliant, but if the founder doesn't have the guts or the ambition to ride through the very difficult times, then there is really no company. So that's something we very much keep an eye on, is kind of the founder persona themselves. As for capital intensity, ideally they're not going to raise £600 million and so we're going to get diluted to absolutely nothing. We'd rather not sit at the bottom of a very large pref stack. So we've got to keep that in mind. What's the capital intensity looking like over the next 5 odd years? That's why we're trying to get in earlier, have a more material position on the cap table. We often syndicate with other people at the same stage as us. We control that in the best way we can, but at the end of the day, the odds are stacked against us. And as much as we want to do due diligence, I think you can speak to any investor and they'll say that there's an element of, luck, timing, serendipity, whatever you want to call it, that gets those companies to the big exits.
We de-risk basically by looking at university spin-outs, but before they're even a spin-out. So there's at least multiple years of research being done, lots of governmental funding's gone in. So we're not talking about a PhD writing their thesis and then has a brilliant idea, but really lengthy time spent and money in big groups, for example in Cambridge or in Boston. And that is a big de-risking factor, because then if they have a large portfolio of patents, you really cherry pick out what you really want to bring over. I compare it a bit like as a farmer, we harvesting the cocoa trees. It takes 7 years to invest in the cocoa trees and finding the right moment to basically bring this cocoa tree in commercial utilization is just before they start, the fruition takes place. And I think that is where we try to focus, and then preferably bring the teams along. So it's all about teams and people, and you can bring the team in. I think Cambridge is a unique environment where actually academics and professors actually can start commercial businesses. In Boston, for example, super complicated. Actually, they're even blocked from doing so. And they then ask a PhD to run the company with no scar tissue, no help. They think they know their business, and because they know the science. And so we really need to really de-risk by adding some very tough regulatory books, or basically having advisory councils around it. I think unique to the UK, and particularly Cambridge, because that's where my experience is really where this is possible. You can actually have the scientists sitting there and then blend the right teams around it with scar tissue. We like to add people which, and particularly to one company I have in mind, we like to add people which have gone through the experience of bringing it through clinical trials. That's a big aspect of de-risking the investment. Scar tissue, preferably bumped their head multiple times, has a lot of scar tissue to share their pain and prevent mistakes. It's all about saving the downside to survive, to getting through those clinical trials. I think that is how the de-risking, and that answers as well the question about how do you size the upside. I think the sizing upside, we'd like to invest in asymmetric opportunity. So 10x, I think that's the low side. I think we need to look at 100x. And I think that's what's possible today with computational analytics. And that's where we see it as a key aspect for us. Computational analytics, one sentence before I take too much time on it, for us has to be an utilization of computational analytics. It shouldn't be a goal in itself. I'm shocked to see the capital raisings of Cusp AI or Quantinium or all these companies, which are basically desktop research companies. They have no domain expertise. They need to hire it in. They contract with parties like pharma companies and then turn around to the professor saying, hey, can you help me to verify my findings? That's outrageous, right? That is the wrong. I've met several frustrated professors who say, I'm using exactly the same machine learning and deep learning tools as these guys, but I actually have knowledge about this and actually can go into the lab to train my models again. And I think that is where we need to focus on. Right? I think many investors are bamboozled away with the shiny objects, and we will see lots and lots of disappointments coming around the corner. And I think that's, as we should look at these investors, where is the domain expertise? Where can you actually help them and bring them using those tools if you have an expertise? And I think we've seen NVIDIA doing that actually. They tried inviting people suddenly to the West Coast. I see several people I dealt with suddenly being invited for 2 to 3 weeks. It scares the hell out of me because it's basically downloading them. You can keep your mouth shut for 1 day, maybe 2 days, maybe 3 days, but not for 2 weeks. Right? And I think that is something we need to prevent them because they are knowledgeable people who are proud of their findings. And we as investors need to make sure that we surround them with the people to protect them from bumping those mistakes and falling into the traps.
So can I just add some comments to that? I completely agree with what you've laid out in terms of the dynamics of the industry at the moment. A couple of caveats. A, depends on the investors, right? We set up H3 because we did indeed see this massive gap in this in-between space, right? You have the old-timers life sciences investors who are very adept at taking on clinical development risk. You look at the current environment, risk-off environment, everyone's gravitated towards later stage, so they won't touch anything that's let's say, well, phase 2 really, because who cares about phase 1 data? And then you have the tech investors who, unfortunately, a lot of them have contributed towards this bubble around AI and computation, right? Who piled into this space over the last 5 years, but with very different expectations as to what it would take to actually scale up these businesses, right? So there's a need in between for investors that have both the tech understanding but also the industry understanding and bringing that together in a thoughtful way. I do think there's been a lot of capital that's been going after early stage drug discovery applications. A lot of it not validated only, not validated in vitro or validated in animals and so on. So I think that is a space that has received a lot of capital and where we see a little bit of a bubble from a funding perspective. But that said, and this is my second caveat, I think if you look at AI overall, dare I say, we are now beginning to move past the hype because we are seeing some very tangible use cases across the value chain in life science. If I think of life science, so obviously the drug discovery, we've seen the impact that AI can have in drug discovery. My view there is that yes, it has disrupted early stage innovation, but actually when you look at it from a pharma perspective, target ID and target validation is only a small slither of what pharma needs to de-risk to take a drug from bench to market, right? Where I see the value of AI is in and around clinical trial optimization. The entire commercial space is a 300 billion market. Pharma actually spends more commercializing drugs than developing them. And it's a market that's ripe for disruption, very fragmented, antiquated tech, and so on. So there's a lot of use cases that relate more to workflow optimization, where AI is absolutely spot on, right?
No disagreement there. So.
Great.
Particularly if it goes to processing and simulations,
yeah.
There's a lot of potential there. But you see as well pharma companies actually now basically insourcing that, right? They see this, they're filling gaps at the moment and they try to find those white spots. I think the innovativeness sits indeed in the more younger companies and not in pharma. I mean, pharma has it, but they would like to fill the gaps more effectively.
2 points here. AI, the point is very much the what's the point, basically, which is the use case. It's a means to an end, right? So we shouldn't take the AI as the sole objective. And also I like the earlier discussion around your approach to assessment. The three of you insisted a lot on the human dimension, like the team, the individuals. So I think that's a very important takeaway. Taking a step back, in the same way that every founder is different, every investor as well, right? So we have here a group of investors, 2 of them being family offices. We understand there is a family behind, fine, but behind that, beyond that, what's the difference? How does this change investment dynamics, being a family office versus a VC? It's for you both.
I mean, it's First of all, start with the word flexibility. I think they're not bound by LPs, instruction manuals, basically how to and what they do. So I think that's if you can connect them. But I need to start saying, first of all, health tech is, or for the matter, even CVCs or pharma CVCs. There's digital health. There's so many aspects of it. So if you're founder in the room here today, really, if you deal with family, find out where the money came from, what do they really know, what did they really invest in, and try to find similarities to that. Don't send your digital tech, health tech to me, because, or if I'm, sorry, this figure of speech, if you have made the past investments in other areas, or it's not your area of interest. I think that's sort of the first comment on that, the differences, the flexibility. Second thing is, most VCs and CVCs are not willing to take the initial risk, preclinical risk. If you find the right family office or investor group like CIC, for example, they will help you to get to that clinical trial. These are crucial groups of people which to bring you in. They often have people on board which actually can be your sparring partners to bring you to that level, and actually can advise you as well to bring other people on board. They're much more your partner than an institution's VC. VC will always tell you that they are your partner, but just merely look at how much money they manage.
I see Vanela being...
I'm going to provoke that then. How much money they manage, and divided by how much money they spend, how much time did you actually can spend on you if they would double their number from 1 billion to 2 billion, right? Inherently to the business model, they're managing capital. That's the provocative one.
Mm-hmm. Again, with caveats.
Yeah, I'd say family office is so broad. Meet a family office, you've met that family office. You can't then group every other family office with it. So it's hard to honestly answer that question. I'd say the only real difference is VCs are managing someone else's money, and therefore the emotional attachment or the mentality of a VC is going to be different if you're dealing with an angel for whom it's their money, or a family office for whom it might be their money, it may be legacy money. There may be people managing the money for the family office. So it's incredibly broad, and each of them will have their own specialities and use cases. The best thing you can do, can you put your hand up if you're a founder in the room, startup in the room? Okay, pretty good. Yeah, it's as much as we're here, trying to find out if you're a good company, you're equally responsible to find out if we're going to be useful in your cap table. And that is the same for family offices as it is for angels, as it is for VCs. And there's a lot of VCs who are very supportive, others of whom are just there to give you some money and they will leave you be. Just think about what that person will mean for you. It's a marriage. You're going to be with them for the next 8 to 10 years until your exit. So figure out how they'll be useful, how they'll operate, what they can do for you, and for whom they represent. Because you can't summarize all VCs, but their main prerogative is to deliver returns to their LPs, right? Whereas a family office, generally, again with caveats, can be more patient.
Am I allowed to comment?
You are.
I'm not a family office, obviously, but I think my general observation is that both the VC space and family office space are very opaque, probably one of the most opaque asset classes out there. I still have a hard time understanding which family office does what, and a bit like you'd go on a discovery process with a VC, you have to find what's the source of money, what have they actually done. A lot of the family office investors may claim that they're very hands-on, very value-add. You again need to do your DD and find what's true versus what's optics. And that applies to VCs as well. There's many different styles of investing out there. There are VCs that are a lot more hands-on, VCs that will take a more passive role in their investment. It depends on the level of expertise. So I think as a founder, you need to, unfortunately, it's a lot of legwork, but you need to go through that process of doing your DD and making sure that that investor-founder fit is the right one for you.
I would like that we share the saying that ultimately it's the chemistry, right? So, and it's for everyone.
Call it medchem then.
and it's the chemistry which really between the people. That's I think the crucial part. Can you click to them? And then applies then to VCs and family office, all the same. I would do one little shout out to some particular family office or groups of large investors like CAC. If you can find someone with scar tissue, again to the same comment, right, who is a former founder, for example, founder of family offices, and it's in your field of expertise, if you can find them, you will have no doubt a great mentor, coach, consultant, whatever you want to call it, at no cost. That comes with the capital. So if you know someone who made money in your field of direction, and I think you find more of those in Boston area than actually here, but Cambridge and Oxford have some of those former entrepreneurial, now mostly investors. I think these are the top lake, I would say, equally for institutionals.
Very, very insightful. Unfortunately, I see already the red sign over there, but I still want to dig a bit deeper for 1-2 minutes and ask you more personally to share your experience as an investor. It's probably not always been so easy, right? So tell us about difficulties or possibly even failures. What would you have wanted to know before?
Okay, I can start. So being a VC is actually not being a founder as well. So I'm a founder in the current context, putting the firm together, hiring, fundraising as well. So you go through the same challenges a founder in the context of a startup would go through, and you develop the scar tissue along that process. So what I have learned throughout that process is that the whole fundraising journey is not an easy one for anyone out there. It's actually, you really pressure test your resilience and patience. So my main lesson learned going through that journey has been not to go into the process with very high expectations on the rationality of the individuals that you'll deal with, right? So if you go into the process with the expectation that you're operating in a highly rational market and with highly rational individuals, you may be in for a big disappointment, right? We spoke earlier about a lot of, I would say, intangible and maybe rational aspects like the chemistry or the timing of something, right? So these are all elements that you don't necessarily control. And so going in with that view, I think, helps the journey, right? So tempering your expectations on how the markets function and the lack of rationality, but also in that the journey, the fundraising journey is a challenging and testing one. So if things happen easily, then great, but very often things don't happen easily. And you develop scar tissue in the process and learn.
I think timing there is the really interesting one. I think you can't always account. There's things you control and there's things you can't control. And I think timing is one of those ones where you can have the great company with a great founder who's just mistimed it very slightly. And that's always hard to take, but you've got to dust yourself off and keep going. And it's the same mentality that investors have to have, as founders have to have. The other thing I would say is, to an earlier point, logos of previous companies or things that they claim to be good at, that's the investor side and founder side. They might have Anthropic, DeepMind, all these people on the logos on the slide, but you don't know if they were making coffee or you can really dig down into the individual. So choose both sides. I think that's a key lesson to learn, and pass the so what test. Whenever I look through a deck, and then again for both sides, so what? You can do this. So what? What's the model? We analyze things by idea, market, model, team, scalability, and then timing, serendipity is the kind of thing. But always ask the so what.
So what? And then you get an answer. Do the listen. That's the question. So no, scar tissue, loads of scar tissue. Per definition, we're in the business of odds, which you'd rather don't share sometimes, because ultimately you have to accept as a starting point there that you make the wrong decisions in investment, which could even be a good investment, but timing went off. So we need to accept as investors that let's do the positive side of life. Call it 30%, which is actually probably for some even a low number. But therefore, you look at asymmetric outcomes. That's the reason, right? Yeah. Let's focus on that. But yeah, chemistry we already talked about. But I think the spotting in someone that he knows he doesn't know, and that's the biggest challenge. Not knowing that they don't know is the most horrible thing. So I earlier referred to the exceptions that you've not gone through that journey of clinical trials, or you have not gone through that journey of building a company, or managing suddenly not 8 people in a lab, but suddenly managing actually a business. And, oh, but I can do that. My father was an entrepreneur. All right? You get these kind of answers which like completely don't make sense. So earlier someone in the previous panel says, get yourself a coach early. I think that's the best advice you get. But if you ask them, you suggest a coach and they say no, see that as a red flag. Because that is an indication they're not going to listen.
Very good. Back to the individual and personal aspects, the relationship, right? So thank you, panel. We are short of time, as I said, unfortunately, but can we get a few questions from the audience? I'm asking Dan and Adam. Yes? Okay.
Hi, it was very useful. So I am a founder myself, and I built the company for the last 9 months, and I feel quite fortunate to be a founder at this special time, because in the last 9 months, because of AI and technology, we're able to sprint so fast in terms of research and development, and I feel like in the past 9 months, we did probably what a founder would have done in the past, maybe 3 to 4 years of progress. And so I feel like my team is incredible in terms of utilize AI and be a super user. So I spoke to a friend of mine who worked for family office, and she said, oh, don't tell investors that you use AI a lot or technology, like because they might just walk away. But I disagree with that. I think now is a special time where you need to invest in founders who know how to utilize that and really stand out and do things faster, better, and cheaper, more cost-effective. I just want to get your view on that.
Yeah, absolutely. You should speak to everyone and anyone. If you've got a high level of conviction in what you're doing, then there's no reason why the words AI should disrupt anything. If someone's got a real problem that you're using AI, then that's on them. There's opportunity absolutely everywhere. And it's a shame on them to not give the opportunity that I think you probably deserve. And congratulations for doing such a good job.
We only agree with you, so.
Yeah, same, and it depends a little bit on what lens they are applying, right? So if you think your company's got a strong moat and that's a sustainable moat, then I'm sorry they haven't been able to recognize that. I think one of the risks with AI at the moment is that some of it will become commoditized, right? I'm worried that becomes commoditized. So I think being able to apply that long-term view and understand what's sustainable, what's defensible versus what might be outcompeted is probably one area where investors are beginning to feel a little bit more skeptical as to what AI can deliver. And also, if you look at the news, there's conversations now starting around obviously, are we in a bubble? We've been in a bubble for quite some time, but now it's been acknowledged publicly, right? So I think that's probably what is contributing to some of the responses you are getting. But if you believe in what you're doing, go for it.
One last question before networking. I see at the back.
Hi,
right.
Well, a question on sunk cost. So with the sort of long timelines you get with FDA approval and getting involved with NICE, how do you assess, once you've done bridge payments and everything, where the inflection might be in these companies and when it's enough is enough, when you should no longer invest?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Actually, it links also with the constraint VCs may have with their own fund life cycle, right? And the need they may have to return to their LPs, which might be a different perspective from a FO, family office perspective.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. I mean, yeah, I think one of you commented earlier on capital intensity, right? That's something we're very mindful of because we have to think of an eventual exit. And so if it's a company that we require, I don't know, 300 million to just de-risk the platform without having a tangible asset that you can realistically commercialize or sell to pharma and so on, then that's a harder value proposition for a VC because they have defined, time frames and constraints in and around their investments. So they need to deliver DPI returns to their LPs, right? So there's always that consideration. Also depends a little bit on the size of the fund, the investment horizon, and so on. So an investment like that, for example, where there's a lot of capital sunk into de-risking the platform, would not be one for a small VC, which is what we are. But family offices, deep-pocketed family offices with a long-term investment horizon might have very different viewpoint.
Sorry. First of all, this long-term investment horizon, I think, should be discussed at a very early stage. So how does good look like in 5 years and what is going to cost? And I really want to see a complete financial model. And although it's never going to happen like that, it's just a picture in a movie, but you want them to think this whole through, what it would mean. And if you have another delay in your clinical trials or a disappointment, how much can you use? I want to hear that conversation very early on. If I hear it, then at least it shows that they have vision and have scope and what it means and what disappointment could look like. Because then early on you can as well have the red flags or your orange flags sitting there saying, hey, we need some help here or we need a different type of investor. And earlier was said about you don't start talking to VCs or big fishes only when you start raising money. Start talking about it, getting early on, because maybe they have a solution to come in and to bridge your capital. If you can show how the journey is going to take you, I think that is super relevant. And to the point, where do you stop investing? If something is this, if you had discussed what these red flags or orange flags are, then you probably were, and you were diverting from that. That means probably something is disappointing. And an entrepreneur, owner, founder doesn't always look in the mirror because he wants to have that. By definition, inherently to founders, they need to be stubborn, and we want them to be stubborn. We want them to have tenacity at the same time. So sometimes they don't always see it. So this is the point about coachability and understanding that you actually maybe need some help or maybe you need to pivot. And the word pivot is the scariest word in VC world. But yeah, you sometimes need to expand on. I've been throwing money at things which the people, we have a pivot. And actually, to be honest, in the end, I should never have put the money in. It's a massive scar because it was so many second pivot that I already saw. And I liked the guy and so I put money in the end, they went bust, right? So if you go to the back of the starting journey, really start adapting your dynamically and iteratively your business plan and just talk it through constantly. How does good look like in 2 years or 5 years? I'll
be very, very quick. At the stage we invest, a lot of it's an emotional instinct. It's a gut instinct. We see 1,000 companies a year, whatever it may be. But also once you've already bought in, it becomes then an emotional instinct and also partly logical of whether you follow your money. One of the best angels I know did analysis on all his portfolio companies, and he did analysis of when he followed his money, did the company end up doing better? And it was really interesting that after the second time of backing it, if he backed any more than twice, then they tend to lose money. And it was because he just pours more money in kids. Just one more round of funding. If I keep following money, it'll get there. But it's going to be an entire case-by-case basis. Some people will only invest primary, and then they'll say, that's it, me done. Other people will follow their money when they can. Again, entirely depends on deep pockets. If they've got very deep pockets and they still believe in their journey, then great. But it comes down to you as an individual. It comes down to the dream you can sell. What does it look like in 10 years' time? And therefore, does it really matter that we fell over this small little molehill now when actually in 8 years' time we're going to be running the world? So it's sell the dream, be passionate, have conviction. We believe in you.
Very, very good. So the good news is we can pursue the discussion during our networking session right now. Thank you very much for bearing with us. It's been a long session. Thank you, panelists, and looking forward to, as I said, pursuing.